I tell people I don't make fragrance. I make confidence. I make romance. I make love.
So, hello. Thank
Hi.
you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful to have Chris Collins of The World of Chris Collins here on the Scent World podcast.
It's my pleasure.
So, let's just dive right in.
Yep.
I know that you grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and you say that early on fragrance became a big part of your life. Could you take us to your first scent moments?
Well, I mean, I think I was about 5 or 6 years old when my dad indirectly introduced me into what my love affair would become of, and that's, fragrance. He wore all like the old school 70s fragrances like gray flannel, which in particular that one was the one that like grabbed me. And then, he had like the English leathers and he had like all the old school ones. But, it was kind of that feeling of like familiarity. I knew he was home, when I smelled him when he came home. And, my dad was like, into his grooming before I knew what grooming was. I mean, I was, my job was to put lotion on his back when he finished taking a shower. And I remember my hands were like this big and his back was like this big. And it just felt like I was doing it for like an hour. And then he would go through his routine and put on his fragrance and all that. So, those are my first scent memories. And they actually, I carried them all the way through because then as I got older, I started to kind of create my own kind of stance and what I liked and what I wore, but always kind of going back to, the first time.
What you learned,
Yeah.
So I heard you were known as the guy that smells good.
Yes.
And you wore Calvin Klein Obsession. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, so when I was 12, 14, I got my first job. And the first thing I went to go buy was, I went to Macy's, right? And I was like, okay, I can't afford the shoes. I can't afford all these clothes. But let me go and see like what the cologne or the fragrance, I thought it was cologne back then, but what all the fragrances smell like. And then I came across Obsession for Men, and I was like, I didn't know the difference between top, middle, base notes and all that stuff. I just knew that it smelled really good. And then when I wore it, I felt confident,
Yeah.
I felt like, I felt older. I felt mature. I felt intelligent. And then, I used to always get responses from people, oh, you smell so good. And I'm like, man, And so that became my thing, the guy who smelled good, because, no one kind of remembers what you wore, but they always remember how you smell. Always.
Exactly. It's an imprint on your memory.
Yes.
I love that. So early on, you were obsessed with Obsession.
Yes.
What about the Obsession fragrance? I know you said it just made you feel confident and that, you just dug it.
Yeah.
And you liked getting the compliments. But were you able to identify what about Obsession you liked?
I don't know. It was something about how smooth and musky the fragrance was. I know now why I did, but back then I had no clue, right? And then I started kind of diving deeper into like the whole world, and I was wearing like, the Tommy Hilfigers and the Ralph Laurens and the Fahrenheits and all that kind of stuff, the Dior's. So that was my introduction. And then I kind of fell off this cliff of like, and back then when you were a collector, you had like, a few. Now the collectors, they have like, it's a whole different ball game. But I had so many, and that was my thing. In college, everywhere I went, it was like, oh, go smell them. You smell so good. So I try to explain that to people. It was literally and figuratively an obsession from the beginning.
Obsession.
Yes.
I love that. So, I know you had a long career in the modeling industry, and I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah.
But what do you think is a better compliment? You smell good or you look good?
Oh, hands down, you smell good.
Right?
Hands down.
Right?
It's not even close for me. Because my style is pretty simple, I mean, I I don't like to kind of think about it. I mean, shout out to, the guys and girls who like really put their effort into fashion.
Yes.
But my effort is into like feeling good. And what makes me feel good is fragrance.
I
and
love
it's
that.
always been like that.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, so we have to talk about this because you had a very long career in modeling, but before that, you wanted to be a doctor, right?
Yes.
Could you tell us, like, what sparked your interest in being a doctor? And, like, did you feel like you had to be a doctor, or is it something you wanted to do, and why?
So my parents were teachers. So, and growing up in Patterson, you had to be tough, right? So you had to be street smart. And I had that because you had to be street smart. And then on the other side, like I was the book smart with my parents, making sure, I was on it. So I was a pretty smart kid, growing up. It wasn't that cool to kind of show you was smart. So I kind of tried to hide it.
Yep.
Looking back, that was probably, if I can tell any kid, if I can grab every kid and tell them, don't feel like you need to hide that you're smart.
Yes.
Because in the end, you're going to end up being cooler because you are smart. But yeah, so I was, I knew how to study. I wasn't brilliant, but I knew how to, if you gave me information, I know how to break it down. I know how to kind of see how everything kind of works. So since I was smart, I said, well, most smart people are doctors or lawyers, right? So I said, I don't think I want to be a lawyer. So let me study biology. Let me, my major was pre-med, right?
Wow.
So I was taking all these biology classes, and then they said, well, Chris, you need to start taking electives, right? I was like, all right. So my first elective I took was Psych 100,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
And then I took Psych 200 and then 300. And then all the way, I got so obsessed with psychology that I ended up getting a degree in psychology as well.
What?
And that ended up being my true love is psychology. So I had to take what I learned in biology, which is the study of living organisms, and what I learned in psychology, which is how they behave,
Right.
and kind of mash that together into what I create
Wow.
through perfume.
Yes.
So it's, my mom told me one day, she said, Chris, how come you never talk about your science? How come you never talk about you being pre-med? I was like, Mom, because it doesn't really, she says, I disagree. And then when she broke it down, I was like, wow, you're right. I mean, it all kind of ties into it because what is fragrance? Fragrance, on this basic level is, these notes that come together to make something that smells really good. And, it's that on its,
At its base level.
on its
right.
base level. But what is it really, right? It's like, I tell people, I don't make fragrance. I make confidence. I make romance. I make love.
Yes.
Because these things, like, they give you that feeling,
A feeling, a vibe. You create vibes.
Right. And I go back to that feeling that I had when I didn't have a whole lot of money to buy, clothes and all that stuff. That's how I want people to feel. And I also want people to, be free to be who they are,
Yeah.
For a long time, going back to me, trying to hide that I was smart. For a long time, I used to kind of show or be who I thought other people thought I should be, right? And then the freest I've ever felt was to like say, I don't care. I'm just going to do and be myself. I'm going to, show whatever side of me that I kind of put away,
Right.
that I was afraid for people to see. And then I said, okay, no, this is me. This is it.
Well, what are some ways that you were able to feel that freedom for yourself? Like, what did you do to kind of feel like, how did you get there? How did you get to the point where you felt like you didn't have to hide who you were? And what were some of those things you did to express yourself?
Well, I got to a point where I said to myself, it doesn't matter if I show you who you want me to be or who I am. It's never going to make you happy. It's never going to make everyone happy.
Right.
So the thing that you have to the most important thing is to make sure that you're happy, right?
Yes.
So if you're happy, then that's the only way you're gonna make everyone else. And listen, still people still may not come around, right?
That's true.
But I just felt like, you know, being myself was honest. It's less stressful, right?
Ain't that the truth?
And you know, it's a long journey to get there. I mean, you know, you're still working through it, right? You know, and I kind of have like, you know, this kind of mysterious dark side, you know, to me.
We have to explore that actually.
Happy to. But for a long time I tried to hide it. You know, it was like, you know, just be what society or what people want you to be. Don't show them that.